Cesare Borgia embraced the man who had nearly destroyed him. Outside the walls of Senigallia, Vitellozzo Vitelli waited in a heavy winter cloak while Cesare's army approached along the Adriatic road. Only weeks earlier, Vitellozzo and 3 other commanders had rebelled, defeated Borgia forces, and helped tear apart the state Cesare was building in central Italy. Now the rebellion appeared to be over. Peace had been negotiated. Money had been paid. Possessions had supposedly been guaranteed. Cesare greeted the commanders as restored allies and entered the town beside them. Then his officers began closing the distance between each captain and his soldiers. Oliverotto da Fermo was summoned away from the troops he had stationed inside Senigallia. The commanders were guided into quarters prepared for Cesare, supposedly to discuss their next military campaign. Once they were inside, armed men arrested them. Vitellozzo and Oliverotto were killed that night. Paolo Orsini and Francesco Orsini were kept alive, not because Cesare intended mercy, but because their lives still had value while his father moved against the wider Orsini family in Rome. 18 days later, they were killed too. The famous version says Cesare invited 4 enemies to a reconciliation dinner and had them strangled before dawn while Machiavelli watched. That version is cleaner than the evidence. No reliable banquet is recorded. Only 2 captains died at Senigallia. Machiavelli was not inside the arrest chamber. The real operation was colder. Cesare persuaded experienced warlords to surrender the military advantage that had protected them. How did 4 men who understood betrayal as a profession walk willingly into his reach? If you're drawn to the darker corners of history, subscribe to Grimmer History. We're on our way to 45,000 subscribers. Central Italy in 1502 was divided into republics, papal territories, and small hereditary lordships whose rulers survived through negotiation, intimidation, and hired armies. The men who commanded those armies were called condottieri. They were military entrepreneurs. A ruler paid them to recruit soldiers, defend territory, capture towns, or destroy rivals. Their agreements, known as condot, defined payment, troop numbers, obligations, and length of service. But loyalty lasted only while the contract remained useful. A commander might fight for one prince in spring and his enemy by autumn. He might protect a city while secretly negotiating with the army outside its walls. He might serve a stronger ruler and still fear that the same ruler planned to confiscate his home. Cesare Borgia understood this system because he depended upon it. Cesare, Duke of Valentinois and commander of the papal armies, was the son of Pope Alexander VI. He had left the College of Cardinals and begun constructing a territorial state across the Romagna. Papal authority supplied legal claims. French support supplied military protection. His father supplied money and political pressure. The condottieri supplied experienced troops. Between 1499 and 1502, Cesare captured or forced the surrender of Imola, Forlì, Pesaro, Rimini, Faenza, Urbino, and Camerino. Local rulers fled, submitted, or lost the states their families had controlled for generations. The speed of the expansion impressed observers. It also frightened Cesare's own commanders. Vitellozzo Vitelli, Lord of Città di Castello and one of Italy's most experienced soldiers, had helped make Borgia conquest possible. Oliverotto e Freducci, ruler of Fermo, had seized his own city through violence against his uncle and political rivals. He understood that power belonged to whoever acted before his enemies did. Paolo Orsini and Francesco Orsini represented one of Rome's strongest baronial families. Their relatives controlled fortresses, armies, and networks extending from the papal court into central Italy. All 4 men had reasons to serve Cesare. All 4 also had reasons to fear him. The turning point came when Cesare seized Urbino. The attack was sudden enough to convince neighboring rulers that alliance offered no safety. If Cesare could remove a duke who believed relations were stable, then every small state near his frontier might be next. His commanders began asking the most dangerous question in mercenary politics. What happens when the employer no longer needs the men who built his power? The answer appeared to be confiscation. so the captains decided to strike first. In October 1502, representatives of threatened rulers and Borgia commanders gathered at Magione. The coalition included men who did not trust one another. Some were hereditary enemies. Some competed for the same territories. Some feared Florence almost as much as they feared Cesare. What united them was the belief that allowing Borgia expansion to continue would eventually destroy them all. Their rebellion was serious. Coalition forces defeated Borgia troops and helped restore the dispossessed ruler of Urbino. Cesare's new state appeared to be unraveling. Towns watched to see whether the Duke could still protect allies or punish defectors. For a moment, the rebels possessed the advantage. They had experienced armies. They knew Cesare's methods. They controlled strategic territory. They could have forced him into retreat. But their coalition suffered from the same weakness that shaped the entire Condotta system. No one trusted anyone else enough to remain united. Florence refused to join them because it feared Vitellozzo and the Orsini. France continued supporting Cesare. Some coalition members wanted total war. Others wanted only guarantees that their own possessions would be protected. Cesare did not answer rebellion with one immediate battle. He answered it with negotiation. Paolo Orsini became the main intermediary. He moved between the Duke and the captains, carrying proposals, assurances, payments, and promises. According to the settlement described by Machiavelli, Cesare paid 4,000 ducats and agreed to respect existing possessions. He also reportedly accepted a term that the commanders would not be forced to appear personally before him. That protection mattered because everyone understood what personal access could mean. A treaty might defend territory. It could not defend a man already inside his enemy's quarters. Cesare spoke as though the rebellion could be forgiven. At the same time, he rebuilt his strength. French, Swiss, Spanish, and Italian troops moved toward him. They traveled in separate bodies, making the full scale of the recovery harder to judge. Loyal officers secured communications. Money arrived. The supposedly isolated Duke was becoming dangerous again. The captains faced a decision. They could renew the rebellion before Cesare's forces assembled, or they could believe that mutual dependence would restrain him. Paolo argued for reconciliation. The commanders accepted. Then they began proving their loyalty. They returned territories to Cesare. They recovered Urbino and Camerino for him. Their soldiers operated in separate places rather than as one coalition army. Every act of reconciliation weakened them. At Magione, they had negotiated as a collective force. By December, they were again acting as Cesare's individual captains. Their bargaining power disappeared one city at a time. Senigallia became the final test. Oliverotto entered the town before Cesare. The other commanders joined him. The citadel had not yet completed its formal surrender, so the captains invited Cesare to arrive and receive the city. They believed they were giving him proof of restored obedience. In reality, they were preparing the ground on which he could isolate them. Peace had not ended the war. Peace had changed its weapon. Cesare approached Senigallia on the final day of 1502. His troops advanced in formations that made their total strength difficult to judge. Separate bodies of soldiers moved along the winter road. The captains saw an army, but not necessarily the full force behind it. Vitellozzo, Paolo, and Francesco rode outside the walls to meet him. Oliverotto initially remained inside with his soldiers. The reception was public. That mattered. Cesare did not enter as an attacker. He entered as the commander of men who had returned to his service. A violent confrontation at the gate would have warned their troops and turned Senigallia into a battlefield. Instead, Cesare greeted them warmly. Machiavelli's later account emphasized Vitellozzo's unease and described Cesare embracing or kissing him as a sign of reconciliation. The precise emotion belongs partly to Machiavelli's polished reconstruction, written years later. The public embrace itself is well supported. It told every watching soldier that the rebellion had been forgiven. Then the movement into town began. Cesare's officers positioned loyal men around each captain. The arrangement could appear ceremonial or protective. In practice, it separated the commanders from the soldiers who made them dangerous. Vitellozzo entered, Paolo entered, Francesco entered. Oliverotto remained the problem. His troops were still gathered inside Senigallia. If he stayed among them, an arrest might trigger resistance. Cesare had him summoned. Oliverotto left the security of his men and joined the others. The four captains were then taken into quarters prepared for Cesare. The strongest accounts describe a private military discussion or conference concerning future operations. They do not securely describe a banquet. There is no reliable evidence of a reconciliation dinner, a final toast, or four enemies seated around a table while Machiavelli watched from the room. The setting was less theatrical and more practical. A commander's headquarters, a private chamber, men discussing the next campaign after an apparent peace. Once the captains were seated inside, Cesare withdrew or gave the signal. Armed guards entered. The commanders were taken prisoner. Outside, their soldiers had already been separated from leadership. Some were absorbed, disarmed, dispersed, or rendered incapable of coordinated resistance. The captains who had commanded armies now controlled no one, not even the doors around them. This was the moment Cesare's entire strategy became visible. The negotiations had not merely persuaded the rebels to trust him. They had persuaded the rebels to dismantle their own protection. Vitellozzo and Oliverotto were killed during the night. Machiavelli's later narrative attributes the physical act to Cesare's lieutenant and supplies memorable final reactions. Vitellozzo supposedly asked for papal absolution, while Oliverotto blamed him for encouraging rebellion. Those details may preserve real testimony. They may also reflect literary shaping. Machiavelli's immediate diplomatic report was shorter and less dramatic. His later description of the method used by Duke Valentino in killing Vitellozzo Vitelli, Oliverotto da Fermo, and the Signor Pagolo and the Duke di Gravina Orsini turned the operation into a model of political calculation. The deaths themselves are certain. The final speeches are not. Paolo and Francesco Orsini survived the night. Popular versions often kill all four men together because one scene is easier to remember than a two-stage operation. Cesare had a reason to wait. The Orsini prisoners were worth more alive while the Pope acted against their relatives in Rome. News traveled between Senigallia and the papal court. Senior Orsini figures were arrested. Their power in Rome was attacked. Their captains remained hostages in Cesare's hands. Only after the wider operation succeeded did the value of the prisoners change. Paolo and Francesco were transported inland. On the 18th January 1503, they were killed at Città della Pieve. The delay reveals how controlled the operation was. Vitellozzo and Oliverotto were immediate military threats. The Orsini captains were political leverage. Cesare did not simply destroy four enemies in anger. He assigned each prisoner a value and acted when that value expired. This is what made Senigallia famous. Not the violence alone, the calculation. The captains were violent rulers themselves. Oliverotto had seized Fermo through the killing of relatives and rivals. Vitellozzo had fought wars that threatened neighboring states. The Orsini operated through armed family power. They were not innocent guests wandering into a harmless celebration, but they had accepted a negotiated peace. Cesare used that acceptance to remove the only protection men like them truly trusted: immediate access to soldiers willing to fight. The result was immediate. The rebel leadership disappeared in one operation. Vitellozzo's family lost control of Città di Castello. Oliverotto's rule in Fermo ended. The Orsini lost experienced commanders while their Roman branch faced papal attack. Cesare seized money, equipment, soldiers, and political networks that had belonged to men who only weeks earlier had nearly destroyed him. His reputation reached its height. To supporters, Senigallia proved he could remain calm while weaker rulers panicked. He had appeared isolated, negotiated patiently, gathered strength in secret, divided his enemies, and struck only when success was nearly certain. To neighboring rulers, the lesson was different. A treaty with Cesare could be real on parchment and useless in practice. A public embrace offered no protection. Reconciliation itself could become evidence that resistance had ended, making betrayal easier. Florence experienced both relief and fear. Florentine leaders had long distrusted Vitellozzo and the Orsini. Their removal eliminated experienced enemies. Yet the victory also placed a stronger Borgia state near Florentine territory. Niccolò Machiavelli, Florentine secretary and diplomat, had observed Cesare's campaign closely. Machiavelli wanted accurate intelligence because Florence needed to survive between the Duke, France, the papacy, and the condottieri. His reports were not neutral admiration. They were warnings written by a government unsure which danger would become greatest. Years later, Machiavelli transformed Cesare into one of the central examples in The Prince. He praised the Duke's ability to conceal weakness, regain control, and destroy disloyal commanders. Senigallia became evidence of political skill. A ruler who depends on unreliable forces must eventually replace or eliminate them. But Machiavelli did not simply present Cesare as a perfect hero. The victory exposed a deeper weakness. Cesare's state still depended on his father's papal authority, access to church resources, and French goodwill. He had destroyed the captains. He had not built institutions capable of surviving the loss of those supports. 8 months after Senigallia, Pope Alexander VI died. Cesare became dangerously ill during the same crisis. Papal politics turned against him. Dispossessed rulers returned. Allies defected. The state he had secured through speed and deception began collapsing. Senigallia had removed immediate enemies. It had not solved the problem of succession. Cesare's power remained personal. When the protection surrounding that person disappeared, towns and territories that had feared him discovered they could resist again. The captains had trusted a treaty without keeping enough force to punish betrayal. Cesare had trusted a state without building enough structure to survive his father. Both mistakes were fatal to the systems they were trying to preserve. Machiavelli gave Senigallia its most enduring shape. His later description turned a confusing sequence of diplomacy, troop movements, arrests, and delayed executions into a controlled political lesson. Cesare appears patient. The captains appear divided. Every movement leads toward the trap. That narrative is powerful because Machiavelli understood what the operation revealed. But it was also a reconstruction. His polished account was probably written or extensively revised more than a decade after the event. It differs in detail and style from the rapid reports produced at the end of 1502. A closer eyewitness-based Florentine account gives a less theatrical sequence. This does not make Machiavelli useless. It means his writing must be read as political interpretation as well as evidence. Florence also had interests. Its leaders hated and feared Vitellozzo. They distrusted the Orsini. They feared Cesare's expansion. Their reports followed the operation closely because every possible victor threatened them in a different way. The victims therefore received little sympathy. Later retellings simplified the story further. 4 men were invited to a New Year's Eve banquet. Cesare smiled across the table. The doors locked. Machiavelli watched. All 4 were strangled before dawn. Almost every part of that scene is either unsupported or compressed. No secure banquet is recorded. Machiavelli was not inside the chamber. The Orsini captains survived for 18 days. Cesare did not personally carry out 4 simultaneous executions. The banquet version survives because it turns strategy into theater. It also changes the moral problem. At a dinner, the victims appear like guests protected by hospitality. In the documented setting, they were reconciled military commanders entering a private conference after surrendering their collective advantage. That reality is less familiar, but more important. The betrayal did not depend on food, wine, or locked dining room doors. It depended on a political culture where agreements had force only while both sides retained the power to punish violation. Cesare's genius was not making 4 foolish men trust him completely. It was giving divided, frightened commanders enough reasons to distrust one another more than they distrusted him. How did Cesare persuade the men who had nearly destroyed him to enter Senigallia within reach of his guards? He did not persuade them with friendship. He persuaded them with structure. The coalition formed at Magione because every commander feared Borgia expansion. It weakened because they did not share one strategy. Some wanted war. Some wanted guarantees. Some believed France would protect Cesare. Some feared their allies almost as much as their enemy. Cesare negotiated separately. He paid money. He promised possessions would be respected. He appeared weaker than he was. While the captains recovered cities in his name, he rebuilt loyal forces and watched their soldiers disperse. By the time they invited him to Senigallia, they had already surrendered the advantage that made negotiation possible. The embrace at the gate did not create the trap. It confirmed that the trap had closed. This is why the story is more disturbing without the fictional banquet. There was no need for an elaborate dinner scene. No need for a dramatic toast. No need for all 4 men to die before dawn. A written peace, a public welcome, a private military meeting, and guards waiting beyond the door were enough. Cesare understood the central weakness of mercenary politics. A commander's honor was useful. His treaty was useful. His army was what made either one matter. Vitellozzo, Oliverotto, Paolo, and Francesco entered Senigallia as reconciled captains. They entered the room as prisoners. 2 died that night. 2 remained alive until their value as hostages ended. And in the final hours of 1502, Cesare Borgia proved that the most brutal peace talks are not the ones that fail. They are the ones that work exactly as one side intended.